This is Ag Matters PM from the Iowa Agribusiness Radio Network, brought to you by the Iowa Soybean Association, your daily recap of the information that affects Iowa's farmers, producers, and consumers, right here in the heart of the heartland. With reports from our award-winning broadcast team of Dustin Hoffman, Riley Smith, and Mark Magnuson. Now, from the IARN studios in Des Moines, here's Dustin Hoffman.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Ag Matters PM from the Iowa Agribusiness Radio Network. I'm Dustin Huffman. Today is Tuesday, March the 26th, 2024. So glad you could join us. Coming up a little later on in the program, we'll sit down for our monthly chat with Iowa Ag Secretary Mike Naig. But first, let's run down the markets.
It's time now for the Ag Matters PM Closing Market Summary, your source for market analysis and settlement prices from the day's trade in Chicago, courtesy of the folks at agmarket.net.
Well, we're at the end of another trading day, and it's time to talk with Ross Baldwin of agmarket.net. And Ross, starting out with those grain markets, it wasn't a good day there in Chicago, was it?
No, hey, Dustin, thanks for having me. It was certainly a risk-off day across really most of the ag space, but the grain markets, it was a fairly quiet day to start with, and just as we got towards the end of the session, the selling really sped up across corn and beans. Really on the corn market had my eye, but corn ended the day 5 to 7 cents lower. Beans were anywhere from 8 on the back months to 12 lower on the nearbys, and the wheat market was 10 to 12 lower as well.
All right, so I mean, any real reason to us taking that risk-off move right there?
I do think first and foremost, there's no shortage of global uncertainty that is going on. We did see overnight that the bridge in Baltimore had the cargo vessel hit it, and that bridge completely collapsed, which is just gut-wrenching to watch that video. And I know some people were on edge, and there's been some charts floating around. That is not a major grain export hub out of our country. So it's pretty minimal impact that it'll have on grain exports. But one thing to note, that is the number one port of automobile imports and exports. So it's definitely something to keep an eye on as they work through that, and whether that port has, how long that port's down for, just for the broader economy. But just really, aside from just global uncertainty, we do have the March acres intentions report that'll come out Thursday. And given the rally that corn's had, and soybeans for that matter, I think people are just kind of on edge, just given, the average trade guess is 91.8 on corn acres and 86.5 on bean acres. So I just think for the time being, people have been wondering, is 475 to 480 D's futures enough? And I think we got that answer today ahead of the acres report. So I don't see corn doing a heck of a lot now until after we kind of see what the acres are and digest those numbers.
Well, obviously the grain complex, as you said, setting up for that Thursday report. But looking at the livestock side of things, cattle still reeling from last week's report the way it looks. I mean, did that have a lot to do yet with today's big sell-off in the cattle complex, or is that still follow through, or is this something completely different?
I think the cattle market still had some follow through from that cattle on feed report. Honestly, I expected to see us find some more aggressive selling yesterday than what we did, and we were sharply lower on the open, but to a lot of people's surprise, all of a sudden before long, cattle were $1 to $2 higher before they reversed that course and ended the day lower. And then right out the gate today, we just had aggressive selling, and I really think the uncertainty around the global markets spilled into cattle. You got the bearish cattle on feed report. There's the issue of the avian bird flu in the dairy industry, and that's what's been causing the sickness that they're seeing. I still think there's a lot more questions than answers on that of what's going on there, but I think there's plenty of uncertainty in the cattle market. We really stalled out over the last few weeks up near the higher end of the trading range that we've been up to. And last week we traded cash cattle to new all-time record highs, and the board just couldn't find any follow through. And typically when you're feeding the market some bullish fundamental news and you can't get the futures to go higher, it's not a good sign. And a lot of times I always think or say that the path of least resistance in cattle is lower, and you throw into the mix the negative cattle on feed report and some of this negative dairy cattle news that we got, and I think it's just kind of a perfect storm of a lot of negative news being thrown at the cattle market. And it's just we're going to have to probably digest this here for the next few weeks, in my opinion.
And finally today, probably the only bright spot we've seen was at least front month hogs. What did that hog market do today, and how is it shaping up to be able to kind of resist the direction everybody else is going?
Hogs continue to hold their own. Like you said, April hogs, they were 42.5 cents higher on the day. June and July hogs were just mixed, down 10 to 30 cents, so pretty quiet. But the hog market, the cutout was a little bit lower this morning, but the cutouts, it's in good shape. And really the beef industry as well, but it had a positive impact. Yesterday's cold storage report was supportive for both beef and pork. And I feel like, just given the depths that the hog markets came from, it's hard to continue to throw a tremendous amount of bearish news at it. So hogs continue to hold their own. But that cold storage report, it showed total red meat supplies and freezers down 13% year over year, which includes both beef and pork, but both numbers dramatically lower year over year, and they're lower month over month, which is something that we've seen for several cold storage reports. So while it's supportive for cattle and they aren't responding to it, given what we just talked about, the hog market, I feel like the hog market's taken note of there's more bright spots than where we've came from. The amount of negativity that we have traded thrown at the hog market last year, and just kind of looking out as supplies tighten up. And we do have the quarterly hog and pigs report here on Thursday. So I just think hogs are probably in pretty decent shape and ahead of that report.
All right. Well, Ross, if people out there want to pick your brain there at agmarket.net and get a hold of the group, what's the best way for them to do that?
You can contact me at our office here in Anthon. Our number is 712-373-3276, or you can visit agmarket.net to find any of the ag market brokers.
All right, Ross, we appreciate the insight. We'll talk to you again real soon.
Thanks for having me.
That again was Ross Baldwin of agmarket.net. We're going to go ahead and take a look at the closing numbers now on the Iowa Agribusiness Radio Network market screen.
May corn was down 5 1/4 at 432.5. Soybeans for May down 10 1/4 at 11.99 even. Soy meal down $1.90 at 339.80. Soy oil 60 cents lower at 48.42. Chicago wheat down 11 1/2, 543.5. Kansas wheat down 12 1/4, 577 1/4. Minneapolis spring wheat down 12 1/2 at 647 even, and oats down 3 3/4 at 357 1/2. Live cattle were down $3.10 at 183.10. Feeder cattle down $5 at 245.45. Lean hogs up 42 cents at 85.57, and pork cutouts unchanged at 93.95. Class 3 milk was $15.85. That was 10 cents higher.
And that's been a check of our market recap. We're going to take a short break and hear from our sponsor, the Iowa Soybean Association, and the Soy Checkoff. When we come back, Iowa Ag Secretary Mike Naig. This is Ag Matters PM.
Iowa Soybean Association is driven to deliver for Iowa's 40,000 soybean farmers. We're proud to provide objective agronomic research, a helping hand with soil and water stewardship, and timely industry news powered by the Soybean Checkoff. Learn more at iasoybeans.com.
Welcome back to AMPM from the Iowa Agribusiness Radio Network. I'm Dustin Huffman. Well, it's time to sit down for our monthly chat with Iowa Ag Secretary Mike Naig, talking about getting ready for planting season here in 2024, some legislative concerns, and even some federal level legislative concerns. Here is Iowa Ag Secretary Mike Naig. Secretary Naig, thanks so much for visiting with us. So you're just coming off a busy week with National Ag Week and, of course, celebrating Ag Week all across the state.
It was a great week to highlight the importance of Iowa agriculture to really every Iowan. Had a chance to get on some farms late in the week, and also had a chance really to have a nice celebration of agriculture in Cedar Rapids and in Ankeny with several hundred folks just getting together to recognize some wonderful people, and again, just celebrate the fact that Iowa really is such an amazing place when it comes to our agriculture.
So, of course, I'm sure talking to a lot of these farmers you heard, especially earlier last week, everybody's just getting antsy, you're chomping at the bit, and that was one thing we talked about Commodity Classic with folks was everybody's chomping at the bit, but pump the brakes a little because Mother Nature sure reminded us who was in charge, and that even though spring's on the calendar, we're at her whim, and she can do whatever she wants.
I had somebody remind me that, do you remember how nice it got, there in February? Well, we all knew we were going to pay for it, right? Well, there it is. Fourth day of spring, we had several inches of snow across Iowa, especially northeast Iowa. I happened to be out traveling in that as well. But look, it's moisture. We need it any way we can get it. And certainly, as you look over the next 10 days or so, very active weather pattern. All the signals that you want to see right now are coming our way. Are increased chance for a little warmer and a little wetter. And of course, when you're sitting here at 194 consecutive weeks of at least D1 drought in the state of Iowa, and really significant drought, and that is a situation we need remedied here as we come into the next, middle of April, right? So I think it's just really good. I kept looking at that radar over the weekend, and I could hardly believe what I was seeing, but really nice to see widespread, very measurable rain.
And we saw that to begin last year too, and we did get timely rains when we needed, but
Yeah.
it is a big concern, that subsoil moisture. I know we've talked in the past about how hybrids and genetics have really become more and more drought tolerant, but even talking to the seed companies that we're looking at this year, it's like you want to look at that drought tolerance, but they're even getting to the point of they're hitting the limits of what they can do, and obviously getting that drought turned around. Of course, we're not meteorologists or climatologists, but we know that drought needs to be reversed, but we know it can't happen in a heartbeat either, because it took 194 weeks to get us where we're at.
Right.
And so we don't want to see that reversed very quickly, because that's going to actually cause us bigger problems in the long run, right?
Well, and Dr. Glisson, the state climatologist, will frequently remind me that, it's good news that we're getting rain, but if we're only getting what we're supposed to be getting, we aren't actually correcting the drought. But at this point, I would wager that most folks would just simply say, as we come into spring, when planters, are going to roll, we want to see some moisture in the soil, and we're certainly seeing that. But it's such a good point. We didn't get into this overnight. We certainly won't work out of it overnight. But again, all the signals that you're seeing are what you want to see. It was interesting. I was at a field day that had a component of it was a planter workshop, pre-spring. And it is a reminder that, yes, it's genetics, it's traits, it's knowledge about how to grow a crop. It's even the planting technology that we have to put that seed in the right place. So, I talked actually a fair amount about that last week of the resiliency. You can talk about resiliency, but we're actually experiencing it. And it's not just one thing, it's many things that contribute to that.
All right, so moving on to some other topics. I know we've been talking quite a bit here this spring in our monthly chats about the poultry processing bill.
Right.
The legislature has sent it on down to the governor, and where are we at, and what are the odds you think of the governor actually signing it?
Oh, well, I'm just a governor's probably got pens on her desk ready to go, start signing a bunch of bills, but there's really two bills that we're really excited about. The additional requirements around foreign ownership of farm ground, further protections and strengthening Iowa's laws. That one is now sitting on her desk. And this poultry processing one, again, just a refresher, what you've got is a scenario where poultry processing, small scale poultry processing, and red meat processing are treated differently. A meat locker can do both official and custom work in their locker, but if you've got poultry processing, you can only do one or the other. We keep hearing about folks saying, I just want a few broilers done, or I want a few turkeys done. I don't want to have to drive many, many hours out of state to have that done. And so we're working every single way that we can to try to increase that processing capacity generally, but poultry processing specifically. That one's sitting on the governor's desk now, and really excited for a signature. All
right, and any other things that we're watching on the legislative front, as far as agriculture? When you talked about the foreign ownership, I mean, let's kind of reiterate maybe where the importance of that, having that, because we already have some pretty strict rules. What's the importance of kind of re-updating those rules, though?
Yeah, we really do. And this goes back, Bob Ray signed that bill into law back in the late 70s, and Iowa has had model laws over, and again, we're talking foreign ownership of farm ground. There can be foreign investment in other things in the state of Iowa, and there are. We've got some great foreign-owned companies here, important to Iowa's economy, and it employs a lot of folks. But what we don't want to see is foreign entities owning farm ground and competing with our farmers. And so we had already prohibited that. And so when you've been hearing about some of these issues happening in other states, entities and perhaps from a specific adversary coming in and buying farm ground, maybe near a military base, Those things aren't happening in Iowa. But because we had laws on the books and they didn't, but what we want to do is be able to say, we confidently say we don't have any issues. And so some additional reporting requirements, really giving the Attorney General, Brenna Bird, the tools that she needs to go investigate, find out whether there are issues, and then just stiffen our penalties just to continue to serve as a deterrent to those that may want to test us. The other thing as we shift into the second half or the final piece of the session will be the budget. Will take center stage. And of course, I've got some priorities there related to water quality, foreign animal disease, and Choose Iowa, our new branded program. Those are some of our priorities. Among many others, we need to keep the lights on here at the department and support the team that does so much important work.
All right, looking forward to hearing how those requests all come out, and maybe looking more at a national scale. We know the U.S. Senate had some dealings they've decided to address with Paraguayan beef. I know you were involved in writing a letter about that and your concerns. You want to give our listeners and viewers a background about what that was about and where that ends up?
Yeah, you've got a situation where me, together with some colleagues of mine in December, we sent a letter to USDA really challenging or questioning the logic behind or the decision to allow the importation of beef from Paraguay. And what happens here is we as a country assess their foreign animal disease response capabilities in other countries before we allow them to import products into the U.S. And others do that to us as well. The idea being that you want to ensure that people aren't moving diseases that you don't want into your country with those finished products or those live animals. And so here we had a situation where the last assessment had been done back in 2014, I believe. And what we're saying is that we need a more updated risk assessment before we allow that. This is not a move to be protectionist in the sense of trade. This is a move to be protectionist in the sense of let's keep foreign animal diseases that could be devastating to us out of the United States. Well, we were encouraged to see that the United States Senate passed a resolution to push back on that rule. Don't know whether that has a likelihood of success moving through the House and ended up actually taking effect. But I tell you, it sends the right signal, calling into question the logic behind doing this and making sure we should never be afraid to hang our hats on sound science and the most up-to-date risk assessment. That's simply what we're asking for.
And one last thing, we're talking about animal health. People have probably noticed since the last time we've talked, our Canadian friends are on their way back north, and they're making their stops here in Iowa, along with other feathered friends. And of course, we know the concerns about HPAI is still out there. Now, knock on wood, at this point, we haven't heard anything new in Iowa. But now the threat, though, is very real once again, is it not?
Very much so. So again, the last two springs, we've seen positive cases for high-path avian influenza here in Iowa, and good news, knock on wood, which I will do. So far this year, we have not seen any positive cases, though we have seen some around us. And so what that tells us is that virus is circulating in that wild bird population as they move north. They do stop over, and that's where we've seen in the past that they have. And then when they come south in the fall, unfortunately, they have also brought it with them. So, every single day that we go that we don't have a positive is a great thing. But it is, as you can imagine, a time of incredibly high alert and significant focus on biosecurity. And our team, of course, is sitting at a level of readiness that means that the phone could ring at any time. And so we're also watching a situation that's kind of developing and not a lot known at this point, but they're certainly getting some news, and that's around some issues with dairy cattle and potentially some connection here as well. So we're looking at all of those things and trying to understand what's connected and what's not. But what it reminds you is that the risk of disease and foreign animal disease specifically is always a risk, always a threat. And the livestock producers have to be on top of their game from a biosecurity standpoint all the time.
And are you able to elaborate a little more on that, what you're talking about, that connection with dairy cattle?
Yeah, you're just seeing some health issues with dairy coming out of Texas and Kansas. And again, it's just one of those things that we're always have our eyes on emerging risks, emerging threats. And, like I said, let the science go where it goes, talk to the veterinarians, This is where a vet diagnostic lab is critically important. So I just think that what I mentioned it in the sense of we are always watching for those emerging threats, and we may need to take action on any number of things, but those are the types of readiness that we need to have.
All right. Well, Secretary, we thank you so much for taking the time to visit with us again this month. And probably about this time next month, hopefully we'll be talking about planters rolling. But again, let's hope we're also talking about there's plenty of moisture starting to creep back into the ground as well.
Oh, I look forward to that. I'd love to see things green up, and I know we're all anxious to get rolling.
All right. Well, Secretary, thank you so much for the time. We appreciate it as always. That again was Iowa Agriculture Secretary Mike Naig. And that brings us to the end of today's program. You can find all our content online at iowaagnet.com. While you're there, don't forget to follow us on Facebook, X, LinkedIn, and our YouTube channel. Don't forget about our free market podcasts that come out through Amazon, Apple, Google, Spotify, and Podbean. From the IARN studios in Des Moines, I'm Dustin Huffman. For Riley Smith, Mark Magnuson, and Andy Peterson, we thank you for watching. This has been Ag Matters PM.